evening. Good evening to everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight, both in person and online. Tonight is the Tater Tots version of helping kids in anxious moments. I'm assuming that you all have a younger person in your life in some way, and that's why you're here, and that will be tonight's focus from pre-K through elementary age. Tomorrow night we'll be focusing on tweens and teens, and from what I understand, it will be different. So if you've got older kids too, well, come on back and have more carrots and dip. Who could turn that down? Tonight we are fortunate enough to have with us Jerry Kaiser, and if she looks a little familiar,
sounds familiar,
that may be because she is our very own Sandy Stover's sister. So that's what you're recognizing.
Were you trying to be like, where's that voice? I know.
She got her undergrad degree from Iowa State in child development and psychology, and she did her internship in child life at Johns Hopkins, and then went on to Shriners in Chicago. She wanted to come back home to Minnesota, which I can understand. So she took a child life job at Fairview Ridges Hospital pediatric floor that was run by Children's. Simultaneously, though, she was working at child life at the University of Minnesota, and then eventually moved on to Children's Minneapolis. And she's worked there for over 30 years, 25 of that in the surgery department. So she knows a little bit about kids that are trying to navigate some anxious times. And that's what her job is about. I had never heard of child life as a thing. I didn't know that it was a job. But what they do is to help children and their families understand and cope with the stress that's inherent in receiving medical care. So how grateful so many people must be that you do what you do. So thank you so much for being with us, Jerry. Onward.
I'm really glad so many people showed up. This is awesome, especially too with a topic like anxiety. That's one we all tend to kind of pull back from a little bit, and when we're talking about kids in general. So for tonight, a couple things we want to make sure we keep focused on is we're just talking our culture in the United States. We kind of mess up the term anxiety, being anxious, being stressed, what exactly we're talking about. So we're talking about helping kids in anxious moments, not the medical diagnosis of anxiety. And we'll differentiate that a little bit so we're sure we're all on the same page. Anxiety as a medical diagnosis is the most common mental health illness that's diagnosed here in the United States. So it's common, and we've all probably know people in our lives that have been diagnosed with anxiety. But what we're talking about tonight is just kids in general, things that we can do for them when they have those anxious moments. And the things we're talking about now, if you have people in your life who have been diagnosed with anxiety, these things are also helpful. You might see some familiar pieces to it too. So as you're seeing in child life, where I work now, I work in the surgery area. So if any of you guys have ever brought your kid down to Children's in Minneapolis, I probably met you. So that area in and of itself is inherently full of stress. There is nothing more stressful than to have anesthesia, because that's a time frame in your life where you are totally not in control. So I wanted to point this out. I wrote this on with my best school teacher handwriting. We become anxious when we've lost some control or feel like we might lose control. So it's that loss of control that's happening first, but that's also the key to how we can help with that. So we'll go back to that a lot, which is why I wrote it overall on the wall. So when kids come in the hospital for surgery, obviously they've lost control, and they also too are concerned about losing control. So that's what I deal with the majority of my time. It's not just the kids, but the parents themselves as well, of course. So what I wanted you guys to do right now, since we're talking about anxious, and yes, everybody got a pen? Did everybody grab a pen? Grab a pen if you want to. She'll share. Sharing's caring, right? On the back of the piece of paper somewhere, write down some pieces of your own life, your adult life, just like maybe one or two stories, points that you can remember that you felt anxious. So for me personally, signing my first mortgage was a super anxious moment. There was like a lot of paperwork and stuff there. Or maybe it's a move or a transition or something. In your own life, just write down some adult life anxious thing that happened recently. I think it helps when we're starting to talk about what we can do to help support our kids, to recognize what does and doesn't help. For our kids, it's also true for us. So when you're thinking about your own experience, what that felt like, it's just easier to put everything in retrospect for your kids too. So once you got a couple ideas down, I see some writing, that's good. We'll go over the differences between what we mean with just being anxious or actually having anxiety. So the other piece I wanted to write the other piece I wanted to put out is I wrote something on this other board too. So in this one I wrote, the goal is to manage stress, not eliminate it. So that's our focus for tonight, is figuring out how to do that. So that's why one of the first points I put on here is it's an important aspect. Being anxious is a good thing. If we weren't anxious, we wouldn't know that there was something out there, there was a stressful point that we needed to pay attention to. A lot of times when the kids come in the hospital and we haven't had surgery before, one of the very first things they'll say to me is, I'm really scared. And almost as if they're ashamed to be scared. And then I need to point out to them, well, that's a good thing. You should be scared. You haven't done this before. Why would you not be scared? That's a healthy thing. So what do you do with that feeling now that you know it and you recognize it? What are you going to do to help yourself find more control back? So those are the types of things with kids that are having an anxious moment. Also, too, we know it's an anxious moment and not anxiety when it's developmentally appropriate. Someone this age, and I'm guessing 9, 10 months? Yep. Oh, yeah, good. This is a primo age for stranger anxiety, this age and 18 months, right? Okay, so that'd be normal for a kid this age to freak out. If I came over and grabbed that baby better yell, right? Because of the stranger anxiety, that's normal. I would expect a baby to do that. But if I walked up to a 15-year-old and said, hi, my name is Jerry Kaiser, and I shook my hand and they freaked out, that would not be normal, right? That's not developmentally appropriate. And also, too, what we're looking for with anxiety is more, it's apprehension without an apparent cause. So if you're nervous about something and there doesn't seem to be a reason for it, I have 3 kids. They're not kids anymore. They're all in their 20s, but so I will be referencing them. But my oldest used to love dinosaurs. And he watched, we watched a movie, and one of the precursors to the movie, they had a little preamble that showed Jurassic Park. I'm kind of dating myself, but yeah. He freaked out when he saw Jurassic Park, and after that, he hated dinosaurs. He was scared of every dinosaur. Everything that we had that had dinosaurs on it, which was considerable, needed to be taken away. Now, that's not an example of anxiety. That's an example of something that makes sense for a 3-year-old to have seen scary dinosaurs and now be scared of dinosaurs. If a 16-year-old freaked out about dinosaurs, that would be a concern. That's not developmentally appropriate. And also, too, when we're looking at an anxiety disorder, we're also looking for something that's going to really inhibit your enjoyment of life. So it makes your life incredibly difficult. And that's always a sign that something needs to be paid attention to. So when we're talking today, too, I want everybody to feel free to ask a question anytime you want to. But since we're live streaming too, we're going to save the last 20 minutes for any questions you might want to ask that you didn't want to necessarily ask while we're live streaming. We do have those you can grab little pieces of paper too if you want to push them forward if you're thinking of a question that's specific to you and your story too. Feel free to take any questions at any point. So does anybody have any questions about the differences between just generally being anxious and having an anxiety disorder? We're all on the same topic. Okay. So for you guys, with coming here today, I think one of the things that's most important when we're talking about the little ones, which we are tonight, anything we do for them at this age, we're teaching them life skills that they'll use on for the rest of their life. So this is a great building blocks to start with. So as you're thinking about some of the tasks that we're discussing tonight, they're applicable for all ages, but we want to think about it in terms of how we're teaching them a skill just like we're teaching them the skills to do anything, to walk, to talk, to feed themselves. These are all skills they're learning as well. So one of the first parts about it with someone this age, I'm glad we have a kid in the room I can keep pointing to, is we want to teach them a good vocabulary of emotional words. If we're expecting someone to manage their emotion and manage their stress, they have to have good words to explain it. And usually as adults, we say, oh, are you happy? Are you sad? Are you mad? That's pretty much it, right? So there's great resources, which I have here, and you guys can help yourself to them later too if you want to. But there's all kinds of different ways you can help your kids develop a really excellent emotional vocabulary. So I'm sure, have you guys seen these before? How are you feeling today? These general ones? That's probably something you saw in your classroom when you were a kid growing up or whatever too. What I really like about these, and this was free online, I could just copy it out. If you just Google search how are you feeling today, you're going to get a lot of options of things you can actually purchase too if you want to. We used to have in the hospital ones like this when they had magnet deals that you could put over each face, so however you're feeling that day. It's kind of a fun thing to have just on your fridge, so your kids can self-express without actually telling you too. You could probably just figure that one out yourself if you want to, but there's a so if you Google search how are you feeling today, you'll get a bunch of these. So I have all different examples of them. So this is actually for a little bit older child, of course. And then there's ones that have more to do with measuring it in terms of a temperature piece. So you're rating it, how you're feeling today different than another day, which might be more appropriate for, say, a 3 to 4 year old. There's also really great pieces about that are much more simple with only a few faces. And then they have lots that are just specific. There's a Star Wars one I found, it was pretty cool. So if, whatever your child's specifically into, that can help. Then the other piece too that's kind of nice to tap into this, because currently with the rise of autism in our society, one of the key components of autism is to try and help kids understand emotional content. So there's lots more information on the web about ways you can help teach kids how to identify what emotions are. And I think it's kind of one of those things that's really nice to have in your own language as well. So if you guys are actually, if you're labeling it yourself, so you have an ongoing dialogue, I'm going to keep, what is this baby's first name?
Rowan.
Rowan?
Yep.
Okay, so when you're changing Rowan's diaper, I mean, Rowan's too little, probably needs some babbling. But if you're just having an ongoing dialogue with yourself, you should probably do anyway. I mean, when you've got babies this age, you just talk. That's how they're going to learn their language anyway. So if you're trying to incorporate, make sure you're getting some emotional content in that too. So there's an ongoing dialogue, but it includes not only his emotional worth, how he may be feeling emotionally, but yours as well. As much broad variety as you can have. yeah, as much broad variety as you can have in it, they're just going to develop that and understand that there's a broad range of emotions. Yeah. The other piece that's nice about these charts is that they don't single out any emotion different from another. They're all valuable. They all have importance to us. We need them all. There is no good emotion or bad emotion. There's just the emotion you're feeling at the moment. So I like that because that's something too, I think, as parents we want to be cautious of in our language, to not avoid emotion that we might have before labeled bad. It's not bad to be sad. That's a good thing. If you're sad, that's what you need to be. You need to be sad. It's telling you information that you need to know to investigate further. So as parents, we desperately want our kids to be happy, right? And that's why we're getting assessed really from culture at large. You're a good parent if your kid's happy. If your kid's upset, do something about it. Like you go to the grocery store and they're throwing a hissy fit in the cart. You get stares from everybody in the grocery store, right? The child's experience in that moment is what it is in that moment, so you have to meet it at the moment that it's at, which is very difficult to do in our society. So it's one of those things too, I think it helps as parents to have an ongoing dialogue with yourself, like how would you say that out loud? I can tell you're not happy with being at the grocery store. I can hear that. It will only be a few more minutes and then we're going to be leaving. It's also a way to calm yourself down and the people around you who are giving you those judgmental looks too, so that they know you're aware your child's upset, or your child's upset, but you're attending to it. There's also too a lot of things that you can do and create on your own, make emotional games. These are, again, like there's a lot of this stuff on the internet right now, but you can create like memory games with emotional pictures, and I've seen this work really good if families take pictures of their own family. So you get your own family's pictures and they match those together, or you get a sibling even to help you out with this and show different emotions and have your toddler try and label what those different emotions are, or match the two together. So if you have an older child, like school-age kids too, if you they would probably have fun making this project. If you took your same child and had them be happy and then have them be sad, have your toddler label, that's kind of a fun thing to do. There's a bunch of different choices with that sort of thing too. You can create dice out of this. You can have like an I Spy kind of game. I know a lot of families like to do this when they're watching something on TV, to label an emotion when they see that on a commercial or something. That can really help kids get that language that they need in order to do that. So as we're thinking about this on one, and you guys with your stories that you already have with you about what it is that you remember being anxious yourself, okay, keep that in the back of your mind, because the next piece we're going to chat about is emotional contagion. Has anyone ever heard of that phrasing before?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a buzzword now. Yeah, I think it's kind of also stuff that's kind of we naturally innately know anyway. But the term itself is being thrown out now. It's a combination of study from psychology, physiology, sociology about the idea of how our emotions affect each other. So this is actually, I think, most pertinently known. We've probably all seen it again with someone Rowan's age. If Rowan started crying and there was another baby in the room, that other baby would start crying too. They're picking up on each other's messages just as we are. I think we all like to pretend we're not animals, but we are. So they're picking up on that cry. If Rowan started crying, another baby would be upset about that because something is wrong. I can hear her cry. I don't know what it is, but I know it's wrong. So that behavior then ends up being somewhat contagious, literally that way as well. But what they're looking at when they're talking about emotional contagion is the fact that we can mimic behavior, mimic the emotive behavior, and take that on for ourselves. And it's much more complex than that, but getting into parenting in general, the idea being is that we have a tendency to affect each other's emotional behavior. So we've all had days, if you have more than one kid, it's just a bad day. Everyone's crabby. You're crabby, the kids are crabby, everyone's crabby. It's just a crabby day. And you can feel that day, and it doesn't matter. It's just going to stay crabby. So when you realize you're affecting your kids' behavior, they're affecting yours, and they're affecting each other's, it's something that it can be more helpful to be dealing with those anxious moments and recognizing when each other's behavior affects one another. And a really good example of this is they have done a lot of research with dental work. Okay, confession, I hate going to the dentist, but my mother hated going to the dentist. She had her good reasons why she hated going there. And it didn't matter, even though she's been a good mom and brought us to the dentist when we needed to be, her attitude and behavior and belief system of the dentist totally rubbed off on us. So when we're helping our kids deal with the anxious moments, usually we're anxious as well. Whatever it is that made your child anxious is often a situation you are anxious in yourself as well. You are your best child's teacher. So when you show them how you're dealing with your anxious moment, you label it and you explain how you do that ongoing dialogue about how you're dealing with it. Your child will learn much more from that than they will from anything else. Actually seeing you deal with your own anxious moment is helpful. But also, too, part of the piece of emotional contagion, it can work toward the negative, it can also work toward the positive. They did a lot of research on the fact that you can change your emotive feelings by physically changing your response to it. So basically the idea is, I don't know if you've ever had like a mother or an aunt say something like, plant a smile in your face, you'll feel better. Let's just see that smile. Actually, literally, it does help. So if you, it kind of helps to do that now. Just consciously, everybody smile, like a big smile, like a big cheesy, get the teeth out of your smile. Yeah, okay, we look silly looking at each other doing that. But it feels different all of a sudden. The other piece they found with this is that it's really hard to be upset when you're faking to be happy. Now, I'm not advocating that one should fake to be happy, but it can sometimes be a way to flip it. And what I used to do when I thought I was just going to kill the kids, it was one of those days where everybody was crabby and we're all on each other's nerves. We're anxious for whatever reason. Okay, now I'm dating myself again, but I used to flip on Rafi. Because it's like really hard to be down when you're listening to that man sing. I don't know what it is about him, but it is. To the point where my kids were like, whenever I would turn on Rafi, they knew I was upset. They might not be upset, but they knew I was. But it was also taught them a life skill. So when I was frustrated, it was a bad day, and I turned on Rafi. I was doing that for myself. Hoping it would help and affect them. But they recognized and saw, they learned more from the fact that they watched me try and do something to help my own anxious moment as a way to mimic that and copy that for themselves and develop their own technique that would work. Be it Rafi or someone else, but Rafi's good. So for you guys, then let's flip this over. So exploring some methods of helping with kids with anxious moments. When you think about anxious moments, there's really kind of two categories. There's anxious moments that happen in the moment. When my son saw the dinosaurs and freaked out, that happened in the moment. I didn't know that he was going to do that, and I had to respond to that in that moment. And then there's the anxious moments you can anticipate, like surgery or a move or a divorce or any of the other things that can happen in our lives. So for the moments that happen in the moment, when they're anxious in the moment, that is why I gave you guys this other sheet, this helping kids cope with stress. So we're just going to briefly kind of walk through this. And this actually, children's lifted off, they have permission. But kidshelp.org, which I did put down here too, it's down there on the websites. But this is a really good resource if you've never tried it out before. They have great resource on all of this, so it's easier to get hold of if you need to on your, just if you're online or on your cell phone if you're looking for a quick reference. It's also a really good reference for just general information about health for your kids specifically, but for you too as parents. But anyway, in this, so children took that information and they modified it up just a few bits, but let's walk through this so we can kind of see where we're coming from and some of the things that you might want to think about. And this advice, there are lots of lists of things of suggestions of what you can do to help your kids in anxious moments. I think for all of you, just to take this in your head, and like code switch it for yourself on how this would work for your particular kids and also to your each individual child. My oldest was super sensitive. If I looked at him cross, he'd just fall apart in the middle, like a puddle. Our middle child, if there was something that was, if we tried to help her support her at all, she'd just go, I'm not talking. That was totally her. And our last child was extremely flexible. So each kid is going to be uniquely different. So take this information and apply it and get rid of the ones you think don't apply to your family. But we'll walk through it. So the first point they're making is noticing out loud. And I think, again, that's that dialogue of you as parents talking to your child and talking out loud those emotional pieces as you're observing them. It's an excellent opportunity to learn. But you'll find yourself, when you're saying it out loud, you'll be recognizing yourself what's actually causing you to be anxious. It's not that they didn't get their shoes on. It could be that you're late for the event. So as you're saying out loud why you're upset, you actually can kind of hear it in your own voice why it is you totally are upset. But then also too, you're giving kids, it's usually kids, especially when they're 18 months maybe to 4, are going to have a much harder time defining why they're upset. You as an adult can easily see what the moment would have been that maybe made them anxious. If somebody took a cookie away from them or whatever. But that age group has a really hard time necessarily labeling, I'm upset because you took the cookie away from me. They're just upset. They're living in that emotion in that moment and they can't differentiate it. So you as a parent, when you're noticing out loud, you're mad, it looks like you're mad your brother just took your cookie away from you or whatever. And I think too, it's better to keep it more open-ended. Here they're speaking more specifically, but I would say it's better to allow your child to have as much opportunity to express it as they can, but when they're younger, you're giving them words to do that. They also mentioned too, to be sympathetic, and I'm going to totally turn that one around. I think it's better to be empathetic, not sympathetic. As parents, we have a tendency to apologize for bad events that happen to our kids. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry you fell down. It's exactly what they do not want to hear. So when you get back to it, think about flipping back to your own anxious moment that you guys roll in the back. One of the hardest things when you're in an anxious moment is somebody saying, oh, just stop crying, you'll be okay, it's going to be okay, it'll be fine. That's like the last thing you want to hear. You're like, no, I'm mad, I'm upset, it's not going to be fine. I do not feel fine right now. I just need you to be present and listen to me. I don't want to hear how you're going to fix it for me. I just want you to know I'm feeling this. So the same works for your kids. So if you're being empathetic instead of sympathetic, you're not sorry for them, you're supportive and you're present for them and their emotion. It's a really hard thing to do as a parent. So I think sometimes it's nice in a way just to pay attention if you can. It's hard to pay attention to your own parents' words that you're using. When you hear it from friends and family who say this without even thinking about it, oh, honey, that's too bad. Oh, that's so sad that happened to you. Then you can hear that. You can hear how that just doesn't click right. How it's harder than it's also in a way when you tell your child, that's too bad. Oh, you should feel better. When you start giving them more direction, that piece also tells the child they're not capable of handling this themselves, and it makes you feel worse. Same as you as an adult, if when you're looking at your back situations, if somebody did that, that makes you feel harder. But I think just laying it out and talking it out loud is really helpful. And then, of course, listening. I would say listening first, right? But say, honey, tell me about that. What just happened? You're leaving it really open-ended. So when their first description back to you gives you a better idea of what they're focused on. I usually do this with the kids when they come to the hospital. I can tell they're upset. Of course they're upset. And I'll say, well, what have you heard so far about surgery specifically? And whatever the first thing they tell me, that's the thing I'm most worried about. So they'll say, oh, I heard they're going to put a mask on my face and just going to hold it down. I heard they're going to put a mask on my face. So I know they're really more interested in the anesthesia and less about the surgery. So if you leave it open-ended with your kids, honey, what are you thinking? Or what just happened? I can see something upset. What's up? Those kind of really open-ended things will help you as a parent narrow it down much more finely. And also to help your preschooler better use the words to figure out why they're mad. You just know they're mad, but you can help narrow down the story a little bit to pick up the pieces that might be why it's causing what they're upset about. I think that comment briefly on feelings, again, thinking about how it felt good to you in your own anxious moment. So when somebody's just present with you and they're listening to you, they're actively listening. That just feels better. It's just you're sharing this experience with someone else validates the fact that it was okay to feel that way. So I'm trying to think of a good end. Let's say you broke up with your significant other. My daughter just broke up with her boyfriend. Okay, it was her choice, not his, so she wasn't as upset as maybe she could have been, right? But that was not the time for me to ask details, right? Same as with a younger child. If a friend just yelled at them and said they don't want to be their friend anymore, that's not a time to go into an immense amount of detail about that kid and how they can make another friend somewhere else and they could do better, or any kind of conversation like that. They just want you present. They just want you to hear that it was sad. And then I think this next part with helping your kids think of things to do. Oftentimes when we're really in the middle of something and upset, we just feel the emotion. There doesn't feel like an end to it. There's no direction for that emotion to go toward. So if you're helping them think of what it is that's going to make them feel better, that's a life skill that you're teaching them. So instead of telling them what they could do, say, well, what do you think might make you feel better? It's even an open-minded question. They might say a cookie. I mean, heck, chocolate always makes me feel better. It's not the worst, it's not the best solving skill, but hey, it's not bad, right? So then you can offer something maybe that's even more helpful. And would you just like to cuddle and read books now? That might be all they really want to do. You can offer up other suggestions and ideas, and your kids will start to develop their own coping strategies so that I think it's most helpful when you can help them develop things that they can do for themselves. They're going to feel more in control, and again, we're anxious when we've lost control. So the more we give them back control, the more they're going to be able to take that experience and apply it to other situations. So if you give them ideas of what it is they can do to help themselves. The other thing too, as parents, we have a tendency to dwell on it. I mean, it really could be a minor event in your child's life. Now they're done with it. But we as parents, we really want to fix this for them and just like make it perfect. And so learning when to step back. Your kid's actually 5 and playing now. You just step back and be attentive to it. And I think then it's kind of smart, if your child has generally had a very upsetting event, is to find times where you can be with them, that they're going to be more comfortable chatting and feel less stressed, like right before bed, or the car is a great time to talk because they're not actually having to look at your face. They can just talk about how they're feeling. You'll catch up things then. If your child's artistically expressive, finding ways to bring that kind of thing out and see what they do with it. If they're really physical, making sure you're finding more opportunities for them to be physical, to be outside and to be running around. You know your child best, but you're also helping teach those kids. You're teaching them this is something they can go to for themselves as well. And then the last piece is limiting the stress. And part of the piece of it too is when your child's showing one stressful event, it's nice to be paying attention in general what's going on with them. So if they have, if they're upset about one event, is it that they're stressed in general, or was it really specifically that event? And we all have a lot of stress in our lives. So it's kind of a way of taking a thermometer for you too, to see what else is going on in your kid's life, and kind of think that through yourself to see what else it is you can help to kind of reduce or pull back on some things. If it seems like they just have a shorter fuse. And I think really the last two of just being there and being patient are part of the part that's the hardest to do, because we want to fix it and make sure it's all tied up in a nice little bow and not actually just relax and let them take that moment and express themselves and let them cry themselves to sleep or whatever it is they need to do to get past that. I think these last two pieces are the parts that we would know and we would want to honor as adults with another adult, is the fact that when we're upset, we don't need somebody coming in to fix it. We just need their presence. So those are some suggestions, and when you guys look at it too and find other options or opportunities you want to do, I would look through the other list too. There's tons online. But one of the things that I think is most helpful is books, so I brought them. And I've got a bunch of different books, and I can't encourage this enough, and I hope that everybody's using reading books as a way for kids to express themselves anyway. But it's a lot easier to talk to another character than it is necessarily your own specific issues. And so I went to Target. These were actually books my kids had, but I went to Target to try and see if I could find something more relevant, or at least topical. And now is a really great time of the year to buy books that have to do with anxiety, stress, fears in general, because that's usually what the themes of Halloween are anyway. So that's part of what draws kids to Halloween. It's a way of learning how to cope with stress and fears and anxieties. So there's a lot of really good books out right now. So if I was a parent, I would totally be like, check that out. So one of the things that helps, I'm sure as parents, you've all noticed books that have the flap parts to them. Part of the pieces of that, not only are they interesting to kids, but also too, it helps them deal with that. It gives them control over an anxiety they have under what's behind that. It's usually typical of the theme of the book anyway. So it could be you're looking at faces or people coming or going or items showing up, but that has to do with the pieces that deal with stranger anxiety and lots of other things. So books with flaps in general are great, but these Halloween themes ones right now are really wonderful for understanding what something might appear to be is not necessarily what it is. And with this age group of these books, so again with preschoolers, their fears are more associated and their stresses, anxieties are more on not understanding what it is that's in front of them, and again, loss of control. So the part that they're worried about is what they don't understand what's going to happen next. And their lives are full of things that they don't know that next step. So books in general are helpful for that, but they can be very specific to the very specific fear that your child has. So we have in the list here, I included, there's www.anxioustoddlers.com. They have on it a list of books. One of their child therapists put together a really great book. It was the best one I could find. A list of books for kids with worries. So you can go specifically to that, but I also think it's just as easy to do that to go to Amazon and look up the topic that you want, and then you can see bits and pieces of the book so you can get a better idea if that's appropriate for your child. But it's nice to have those on board, and when you have them in your house, the other thing that's kind of nice about it, it also gives you a clue what your kids are thinking about when that book comes off the shelf and you see it down on a table or something somewhere. You know, they were sort of thinking about that anywhere. They really love that book and want it read to them over and over again. The other advantage of a book is the story is in control. So there's a beginning and a middle and an end. They know what's going to happen on the next page. And it's an easier way to take that content in for preschoolers who are, their definition of time and space is a little squishy. So having a book is a great way for them to understand those concepts so much clearer. And then also too, okay, who has seen Inside Out? Come on, you guys will have to see if you haven't, you have to go get it. Okay, there are a lot of good movies and TV shows with content about emotion and anxiety and anxiousness and stressful moments. It's a common theme for preschoolers, so in all preschoolers shows there are thematic elements to that. And so depending on what your kid's really into, if you look it up, and you can look it up on whatever the show frame it is, and find out which episodes deal with what issues, and you could just YouTube that or Netflix it and get that specific episode if you want. But Inside Out is probably the best one I've ever seen with just general expression of emotion, and it has good content really for a broad range. But the part that's probably the best about it is it doesn't hold one emotion more important than another. So, and it tells a story in a way that makes it easier for kids to understand emotions in general. So, of all the content I've ever seen, Disney at least came through on that one. It's really good. So, and I think it has applications for when you're older as well. So if you haven't seen the movie, it's kind of a good one to have. It's kind of a good one to actually own, because it's, again, can serve that same purpose that the kids are feeling that they need to revisit that. They can always pull it out and watch it whenever they want to. But I also, too, just recently saw, okay, Sesame Street. I should just ask, because who here, your kids, do you still watch Sesame Street? Do your kids ever still watch it? Because I know now it's kind of hard since it went off. Okay, they've always been really good with emotional stuff anyway, but they just recently put one out that was really good. I saw this online, so you could just pick it up online, about give yourself a hug. The idea being that you can self-soothe yourself anywhere you're at by giving yourself a hug. So if you just Google Sesame Street, give yourself a hug. It's nice, it's simple, and it shows how just if you're feeling emotionally out of control for whatever reason, you can always give yourself a hug. So I would definitely suggest that, but whatever group, your kids are more into Daniel Tiger, they're more into Sophia the First or whatever, they all have content that deal with something specific. Doc McStuffins is another one that deals with emotional content, I think, fairly well too. So find your thing that your kid likes. It's sort of nice to know that ahead of time, to do a little research for yourself ahead of time. So you know if they do have a topic that fits directly with a stressful moment, so you can access that in the moment when you need it. So it's just sort of nice to know what your resources are, because the advantage of that, you can do that anywhere and everywhere you're at. So some of the websites that I mentioned kidshealth.org, which I can't emphasize that enough, but gozen.com, they have a really great listing of 49 phrases to calm an anxious child. And I would actually say, this actually sort of helps the parent as well. So I'm going to give you guys a couple suggestions, and if you like it, I would definitely check it out. It was too long to add into this, but some of their suggestions, and you guys know your kids, but one of them was, can you draw it? So that's actually kind of a nice way to say, if they're anxious or scared about something, just show them, can you draw it? You're in control of it, because also too, you have it in your piece of paper. I know a lot of kids, once they've drawn whatever it is that was making them anxious, then they can rip it up. It feels really good too. And the next one is, I love you, you're safe. So sometimes really that's all they need to know. They just need to know they have a backdrop, and that's you guys. So if they're anxious, you have their back. Even if you can't fix it for them, you're there and you're present. Okay, here they're talking about blowing, but taking deep breaths. And have you ever done yoga or anything? You know, taking deep breaths is a helpful thing. It's an extremely hard concept to teach a kid. So there's different ways you can work with that. One of the ways I like is blowing up birthday candles. So whatever birthday they are next, to have them practice blowing up candles. And the candles are your fingers. So taking a deep breath and blowing it out slow is always helpful. And their suggestion of that, let's pretend we're blowing up a giant balloon. We'll take a deep breath and blow to the count of 5. I actually think bubbles help even more. And to show here, I'm going to show, just blow some bubbles first. Yeah, I know, you're sitting closest, so you can fly them. Okay, I made sure they worked before. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm just saying, I made sure they were good.
Sabotage.
Yeah. Okay, that's excellent, good job. Okay, now try and blow a really, really big one. Yeah, see how big a one you can get. It's just a challenge. This is not his first bubble blowing. I know, I had a hard time finding bubbles this time of year, so they're, okay, that's beautiful. That's a thing of beauty. Okay, but to blow that bubble, you had to take a really deep breath and blow it really slow. Now that's a concept a kid can get. That's also too one of the ways that helps to take those deep breaths. These were typical, these bubble tumblers. I'm sure everybody's seen these, right? So you know you turn them upside down, they don't spill. I like those so much better. But I do have these, so we can get these out in a second. But blowing bubbles, having them on and ready is always helpful. There's also too, the other thing when you're taking a deep bubble, not only are you taking that deep breath and blowing it out slow, but you can't scream while you're blowing the bubble, so it also gives you time to focus and think through your thoughts too.
It cleans the floor.
Yeah, it does. You don't want to get it on leather though, that makes people mad. So blowing bubbles can be really helpful. Okay, their next suggestion is, I will say something and I want you to say it exactly as I do. I can do this. So sometimes that's just another reference of saying, if they get anxious about something like jumping in the water, let's say, something simple like that, but they really want to jump in the water, then if they're repeating after you, it's a brain switch piece, so their brain is having to focus on concentrating on the words you're saying and have you repeat those same exact words, which interrupt the message they're getting about being anxious. So that works for some kids. That would work for my oldest, that would not work for my middle child. I'm just kidding, one's over here. Okay, here's another one. I like this one too. What will happen next? So if your child's anxious about something, I remember when I was little, I didn't think the school bus could make it over a bridge. That just didn't seem logical to me. We were going to fall through that bridge. So I made my life miserable for my brother because I'd be screaming on the bus, ah, we're going to fall through the bridge. But if he actually said, what would happen next? I'd really have to stop and think through it. Probably really not going to fall through this bridge. And even if we did, we would just get out of the water. I mean, there would be another thing to follow next that wouldn't be so awful. You're helping your child take that next step. The next one is we're an unstoppable team. I kind of like that too. Then you're partnering with your child again. So even though they may feel out of control, they know that you're there to have their back. But you're not telling them you're going to fix it. Just together we're going to figure this out. Have you guys seen those videos of the little girl in front of the mirror and her dad's teaching her all those self-affirmation pieces and she's screaming in the mirror? Isn't that adorable or what? Okay, that's actually a really good example because here's the next one. Like, have a ball cry, I'm a warrior, I'm unstoppable, look at world, here I come. Whatever it is like that, whatever your family go-to cheer is actually super helpful because it's, again, back to almost that an emotional contagion piece where you're saying something that's self-affirming makes you actually feel that way a little bit. But I think it's kind of more fun when it's your family and you're doing it yourself. And I love that video because they're in front of a mirror and he's really empowering her. Here's another one. We did something with this at the hospital. If how you feel was a monster, what would it look like? So drawing again. You're in control of it if you draw it yourself. We actually had this thing where we had someone make the drawings into an actual monster with stuffed animal. So if you had those kind of skill sets, that would be really cool. The next suggestion they have is I can't wait until, which is good again. This is good again for preschoolers our age group that we're talking about today because time is a very fluid concept and they're feeling that moment is going to, for them, extend forever. So if you're breaking it up for them, and this is what we probably give advice as adults, we want to break up our anxious. You have a big project to do or something, you want to break it up in small pieces. Well, if you're saying that to your child, I can't wait until, also is letting them know this event will be done and there's something positive coming down the road. There's always something. So whatever it is, you as a family already know what it is. Here's another one that fits in again with adults' anxiety control is let's put your worry on the shelf while we just do something fun, and then we'll pick it up again later. So you can actually even pretend it to do it. So okay, you're worried about falling on, you're worried about the bus thing, whatever. Let's just put this up here for right now, and we'll play for a little while, and then we'll get back to it. Typically, they'll just forget about it because they've already worked past that. But they can also get the idea of you don't have to take it all in the moment. You can break it up and get back to it when you're in a better place to think through. So they have some more things on that, like this feeling will go away. Let's get comfortable until it does. So they might just need a snuggle and a reminder that the thing's going to be done. Timing can work really good too if you have kids that are more analytical. So if you say, okay, I can see you're upset. Let's put the timer on and see how you feel in so many minutes or whatever. There's different ones you can actually buy commercially now because it's an element that's used a lot in classrooms. But your kitchen timer can work too if you want, and see how they'll feel at that moment. Actually, too, they can recognize, I felt really bad for 2 minutes. For 2 minutes, you felt bad, but now you actually feel okay. So that feeling that was scary only lasted 2 minutes. So it is something that you can handle more than you realize that you can. Probably one of the best things I like the most, I'm going to skip some of these other guys because you guys can look them up yourself, but tell me the worst thing that could possibly happen. So, and a good example of this one is, there's always worse things that could possibly happen, right? But I think when the kids are usually thinking of something like something that's super scary, and this is for a little bit older child, not a preschooler, more like 5 to 8, 5 to 9, and they're somewhere, if they're worried about something like, say they're worried about being on a boat because they're afraid that they'll fall in the water and drown or something. They're at an age where they could have heard a story that someone drowned somewhere sometime for some reason, and now it's hard for them to separate out that story versus what could happen when they're on a boat and they could drown. So if you said, what's the worst thing that could happen, you can break it down to what would happen, what would each step happen. If you fell in the water, we would pick you up. If you fell in the water, what else could we do? Or you could ask them to problem solve themselves. If you fell in the water, what would be a good thing to do? Well, we could throw your life preserver, or we could, whatever it is that works well with the worry that they have. But when you narrow it down to what's the worst thing that could possibly happen, that breaks it down for them a little bit to understand that there are options, there's pathways, there's things that could step in and alter the situation from where their fear is taking them. Okay, I like this one too. Let's have a debate. So this would have worked really good for my oldest when he would be like 9 or 10. If he was worried about something, to have a debate and say, let's break it down. How would this work or not work? Would that really happen? Would it not really happen? Give me your facts. Why do you think this would happen? That could work for certain personalities. Some of the other things that are nice to do too, I think, is just to break yourself out and do something physical. They're suggesting going for a walk. But I think even too, just for your kids and you know who they are, okay, you're feeling stressed. Let's get some of that stress out of your body. So let's do 10 jumping jacks or whatever it is. That can actually really help a lot. And if you throw a number on it, that's more concrete for a school-age child. Let's do 10 jumping jacks and work some of that out of you, because your stress literally is part of your body. It's part of the tension that you feel within you. It's in your blood system, your heart, everything. So if you want to increase those endorphins, exercise works anyway. That's a really boring thing to tell a kid. If you tell them, let's see if you can do that. Let's try 10 jumping jacks. I'll do them with you. Let's wave that stress away. That kind of is a more concrete thing. And again, I think a kid could do on their own in their situation when they're feeling it's stress for whatever reason.
Dance party works really good at our house.
Dance party? Yeah. Okay, I'm not saying I didn't dance with that Rocky, because I kind of did. Yeah, dance party's good, and it probably makes you feel better too, right?
That made me feel better.
I'm not going to kill those kids with dance. Yeah. Also, too, in gozen.com, it's an unusual website, so, check it out yourself first. But they have this kind of cool video, depending on your child and their personality, so again, parents, I'll look at this first, that kind of label emotions sort of on a cheap version of Inside Out in a way, describing your emotions in a way like that. Sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I think it kind of adds to the confusion of understanding your emotion in a way that way. But if you guys look at it and see, it could be a perfect fit for your kid. But they talk about your anxiety as a person, sort of. And so they have another reference point to that. So check it out, because it could be something. And one other thing that goes in.com is kind of, you have to sign in on it. And they give you email feedback, which is sort of nice because then you're, and they also update with a bunch of other things too. It's all free, of course. You do tend to get a little bit of email, just saying. So, depending if that's, but they have a lot of really good advice. And I think it sort of works good. You know, did anybody sign up for a video when you were pregnant with your kids about, you know, this is XYZ week, this is what they look like, kind of thing, and then you get video or you get email updates? Yeah, so it's sort of the same way like that, only it's about anxiety and things you can do for your kids. So, and for preschool or early school age, so it has its advantages. So they also mentioned squeeze balls. I guess you guys have seen these before. Yeah, but anything can be, you don't have to, anything that squeezes is kind of nice. And actually, I brought some because it's not really appropriate for younger kids, but anybody have older school age kids? So a girl taught me this who was coming into the hospital to get her appendix out, and she was very pleased with herself that she remembered to bring her stress ball before they left the house to go get her appendix out. And what she did is she just took a balloon and filled it up with cornstarch. So that worked really good, and she had actually a really cute balloon. I just got some boring ones, but it's an easy thing to do too because it's also a and you can make it yourself. You can create it yourself. You can actually even draw on the balloon if you wanted to, like however you wanted with a Sharpie marker. Of course, with people balloons, you can't relate technology. You definitely wouldn't want it around somebody that age. But if you have older school age kids, that's kind of a fun thing to do. And I think it's better that they get to make it themselves. So anybody have spinners in your house? Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
this is actually my personal one. I use it in rush hour, but because it does help. Yeah, keep the other drivers safe on the road. Any fidget thing like that serves that purpose. So you're knitting, that's a fidget thing. It helps, it's calming and soothing to do a repetitive activity. So whatever that is that can work for your child, you can do, depending on what it is, there are more toys out that are fidgeting again because it works for kids on the spectrum. But for all of us, just for a calming, repetitive activity, whatever that is, you can have your own limits. I know teachers, this drives them crazy and they won't let them be at schools. I don't know if they let them be at the school here. But things like this are nice because you can self-soothe. So if you guys think back at when you were a kid, you probably had something like that too, those little wheelie thingies or yo-yos or flapper-dealies or, I don't know, stuff like that. Yeah, you remember those? Yeah. You know, they smell good, right? You can throw a lot of that
That's
tension.
what, he had a drawer at his school.
You had which
The
what?
headmaster had the Cooper drawer.
I was the odd one.
Well, you probably had all
I
the
got
cool
taken there
stuff.
a lot.
Well, then you had unenlightened teachers, right?
I thought.
Yeah, it's that kind of, because you're going to find doing something like just sitting there, you know, people who click their pens, we all know what that person in the video who just clicks their pen all the time. Whatever those things are, those are actually helpful and they serve a purpose. So if you guys think of something that can be not drive you crazy, that's super helpful for your kids. We mentioned deep breathing, and I think with kids it works best with blowing bubbles. It makes more sense, taking a deep breath. They look at you like, what? But the other part of that too is when you've had your best, happiest experiences are usually probably when you